Welcome back to the Audible Genius Studio. We're going to talk about the piano roll, all the different ways we can interact with our notes. Each track has its own piano roll, just like you see in every major DAW, and we can add and edit notes in various ways. The most common mode you'll see up here called note. This is the one that's enabled by default. And this is, you just click to add a note or move a note around or drag the end of it. And that's, what you're going to use most of the time. Now, when you click a note in, it's always going to fill one column, right? So one column wide. But you may know that you want a longer note, right? And what you can do is add the note, move over to the edge, and then drag the end. But that can get a little tedious if you're adding a lot of longer notes. So what we added was this feature that'll let you change the duration when you first click a note before you even lift your mouse up. I'm going to click in this note, but I'm not going to release the mouse. And you'll notice the mouse had turned into this left-right arrow. So now if I keep dragging to the right without lifting my mouse, it'll give me that duration. So this is great for throwing in a bunch of longer notes really fast. Now, to delete a note, we can double-click it or click it and hit the delete key. But if you find you need to delete multiple notes, lots of notes, you can switch over to the erase mode or hit the E key. And now our mouse head turns into an eraser. We can click and drag to erase multiple notes. If you want to erase every note, there's this erase all button at the bottom left. Next mode I want to talk about is the brush mode. Before I do that, I'm going to erase all of these hi-hats, and you'll see why. Switch to brush mode. This lets you click and drag multiple notes in at once. So I'm going to click right here. This is great for hi-hats. That's really what I use it for more than anything else. Next up is multi. Multi lets you select multiple notes at once and then do something to them. So I'll click and drag all these hi-hats, and now I could click and drag them up and down all at once. Next is velocity. I'm going to show you how this works with drums. Let's mute the other tracks. If I click any of these notes, watch what happens. It gets shorter in height, which means it's going to be quieter. This is really important for drums. You can create real bouncy, lively drums with velocity. One common thing to do is just shorten the velocity or reduce the velocity of every other hi-hat. I'm going to do some kicks and a snare as well. And here's what it sounds like. Now, that sounds great. And you might be wondering, well, I can't really tell. Did the velocity do anything? There's a cool little feature here in the DAW settings, this velocity master button. With it on, which is its default state, all the different velocity changes that you make will affect the sound. They'll do what they're supposed to do. But if I turn it off, it will ignore all these velocities. So now all these notes are going to be played as if at full volume. And listen to this. It's very stiff. Listen to the hi-hat in particular when I turn the velocity back on. Feel everything starts to bounce a little bit? It's got more depth. Off. On. Really important tool to use in your drum patterns. Next up, let's talk about the expression tool right here. And let's zoom in on the melody. Now, let's listen to this melody. It's cool, but it's a little stiff, especially these first three notes. Do, da, do. The expression tool will allow me to do a couple things. Number one, it'll allow me to create legato connections. If I click in the right half of a note, it just makes it a tiny bit longer. Watch. Just a little bit longer. If I click it again, it gets rid of that. If I make it a little bit longer, that means it's going to overlap the beginning of this note. And listen to what happens to the connection between these two notes. Ooh, ah. Turn it off. Down, down. Hear that? I'll do it here too. So now the end of this note's going to overlap this one. Ooh, ah. It kind of bends between the notes now. Turn it off. It really allows you to create more expressive melodies. That kind of bending between notes is something you hear a singer do, or a guitar do. So it really brings in expression into your melody. You can also use it in your bass as well, but I find I use it in the melody most of the time. The other thing this will allow us to do is create grace notes. So I'm going to add a note here with my regular note mode right below this note. And then I'm going to switch to the expression mode. And I'm going to click the left half of the note. And what that'll do is it'll kind of bring the beginning over a little bit. And now what we're going to get is this note's going to be played at first, but then it's immediately going to bend up to this note. Right? So it's starting on this note, but we really want to go to this note. That's called a grace note. Another great expressive tool. Okay, so now let's go over here to our DAW settings. There are a few things here I want to show you. First off, you can change the number of bars. So like we have 2 bars, right? 1, 2. We can increase that all the way up to 4. Right? So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 bars for longer beats. And then we've got the number of beats per bar, right? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 beats per bar. Well, we can change that to, let's say, 3 beats per bar, 6 beats per bar, whatever you want to do. And then we can also change our divisions per beat. And I really like this feature. Let's look at the drums for a second so I can show you why I like this. So right now we have, just 4 divisions per beat, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me mute the other tracks. If I switch to 6, and you got multiple choices here, but if I switch to 6, watch what happens. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divisions per beat. And it essentially puts a space between each of these pairs of hi-hats and gives us a shuffle. Go back to 4. And it's straight. You can also use those 6 divisions to create triplets as well, but I really love using it for shuffle feel. And then we also have these pitch labels. So at the beginning here, we have the labels for each row, right? You got the kick drum label, side stick, snare, etc. Sometimes, especially if you have a lot of bars, as you get further to the right, you may lose track of what column or what row you're in. Turn on pitch labels bar, and it'll add an extra label at the beginning of every bar. Switch to beat, it'll add at the beginning of every beat. So this is just a good thing for your eye to help you keep track of where you are. Now let's look at track settings, what we can do with the piano roll here. Let's go into our melody. And there's a few things I want to show you here. Number 1, we use numerical labels for all of our pitched bass tracks, right? That's bass, chords, and melody. But if you are more comfortable with letters, you can switch to letters here. Just like this. Or you can have it blank, which I find is kind of fun. It sort of takes your brain out of the equation. And you don't really know what you're doing. You have to use your ear. It's kind of a fun way to write music. We'll go back to letters for a second, and we can extend our range, right? So right now we have a full octave's worth of notes, but I can increase that. Drag this up. More notes. Drag it down. Less notes. And we can change our root, right? So we have a C root now, but let's say I want to move my song up or down. Let's drag it up. Right now our root is F. The notes. This is a great way to transpose everything up or down. And you can have shortcuts too. So if I just want to move it up one little half step, one little letter, I just click this arrow, right? This takes us back down. Or if the next arrow will do an entire octave. So this will take me up to the next C. Let's go up to the next C. All right, so it's a whole octave higher. And then we also have this lock feature. Let's say you want to change the range of our grid, but you don't want the notes to move along with it. Hit lock. Now, I'm changing the root, but the notes, see how they're sticking to C where they originally were? It's locking our notes with the root of C. Okay, last. Copy and paste. I'm going to switch to the multi-tool. Let's drag all my drums, for example. Copy. And then move the playhead to whatever column, in this loop column, you want the paste to start in. I want to paste all these drum notes to this measure. So I'm going to start right in the first division of that measure. Paste. Boom. Now, you're watching me show you how the piano roll works. But I'm also, writing drum patterns, bass lines, melodies. We also have a chords track if you want to write chord progressions. You may be wondering, well, how do I write this stuff? For that, I recommend our course, Building Blocks. Building Blocks is a video game style interactive training course that takes place right here in this DAW, where you'll learn how to write drum patterns, bass lines, chord progressions, and melodies, and how they all go together. It seamlessly combines music theory, composition, and ear training, and you actually create music as you go. You learn by doing. It's very fun and it's really effective. Just go to audiblegenius.com/building-blocks, or if you're here in the studio, click the building blocks link at the top.